It all started with a simple dream: to build a small home gym in my garage. Nothing fancy, just a few essentials: a squat rack, a treadmill, some dumbbells, and a pull-up bar. It was my way to stay fit, focused, and sane after long workdays. I kept everything organized, soundproofed the walls with foam panels, and never used the equipment at odd hours. But in neighborhoods ruled by an HOA, even peace and self-improvement become crimes. The first warning came wrapped in a plastic sleeve taped to my garage door: a noise violation notice. It accused me of disturbing the tranquility of the neighborhood with repetitive thumping sounds and equipment movement. The absurdity of it was almost funny, especially since my workouts were quiet enough that even my next-door neighbor, 2 houses away, hadn't heard a thing. I dismissed it as a misunderstanding. Maybe someone mistook a passing truck for gym noise. But that illusion ended when I saw the HOA president, Mr. Collins, standing across the street with his clipboard and phone, glaring at me like I was running a construction site in my garage. He had a reputation for targeting homeowners who didn't bow to his authority. My garage gym gave him a new excuse to flex his power. Within days, the fines began. $150 for non-compliance. $250 for continuing disturbance. They escalated so fast it felt like a setup. So, I requested a noise inspection. I wanted proof. But every request I sent was mysteriously lost or delayed by the HOA office. Collins and his board controlled everything: the security cameras, the maintenance crews, even the neighborhood WhatsApp group. It was like living under a suburban dictatorship. Then, one afternoon, while finishing a quiet session of deadlifts, flashing red and blue lights filled my driveway. 2 police officers stepped out, looking confused but professional. They said they'd received a complaint from the HOA that I was operating an illegal gym business out of my home. I could almost hear Collins smirking from behind his curtains. He'd finally gone for the nuclear option, bringing in law enforcement to intimidate me. I invited the officers in to take a look. They were polite, thorough, and quickly realized there was nothing remotely illegal happening. Just a few pieces of equipment, some mats, and a fan running in the corner. But as one of the officers walked toward the back of my garage, he noticed something strange. The HOA's maintenance shed, which was supposed to be next to the community park, was visible behind my house, and its door was slightly open. Inside, faint glints of metal caught the afternoon light. Curious, the officers decided to check it out. Collins, who had followed them down the street, immediately started protesting, waving his clipboard and insisting that they had no right to invade HOA property. But the officers reminded him that since the HOA had filed an official police complaint, their grounds were open to inspection for verification. The moment the shed door was fully opened, everything changed. Inside, stacked carelessly in piles, were power tools, lawnmowers, air compressors, and brand new equipment still in boxes, all with community property tags. But what shocked everyone most was that many of these items had been reported missing in HOA financial records over the past 2 years. The officers exchanged looks. Collins turned pale. They called for backup. A second patrol car arrived, followed by a community inspector. As more lights illuminated the scene, the truth began to unfold. It turned out the HOA had been billing residents for replacement maintenance tools every few months, claiming old ones were damaged or stolen. But in reality, the missing tools had been stored here, in this hidden shed behind my property, likely to be resold later. As officers began documenting the evidence, residents started to gather. Curious neighbors whispered among themselves, phones raised to record what was happening. The same HOA that fined people for parking too close to curbs was now being exposed for theft and fraud. Collins tried to explain it away, but the officers weren't buying it. Every new item they pulled out made the situation worse. The shed wasn't just full, it was overflowing with evidence of corruption. That night, the once feared HOA president stood frozen in the flashing lights of his own downfall. His clipboard trembled in his hands. The same board members who used to back him now stayed silent, avoiding his gaze. And as the officers loaded the confiscated items into evidence vans, I stood quietly by my garage door, realizing how strange life can be. A simple home gym, something I built to better myself, had accidentally uncovered a scheme that had been draining the entire neighborhood. It wasn't about noise. It was never about the gym. It was about control, power, and greed, and Collins had used his position to feed all three. As the police cars drove off into the night, I could already sense the shift in the air. The neighborhood that once whispered behind blinds was finally seeing the truth. But I also knew the story wasn't over yet. Because people like Collins never go down quietly. And when a man who's used to being in control starts losing it, things can get dangerous fast. The night after the police raid, Oakwood Estates was unrecognizable. The same quiet neighborhood that once lived under the HOA's iron rule now buzzed with late-night whispers, glowing phones, and cautious excitement. People who had spent years tiptoeing around HOA rules were finally realizing that the empire built by Mr. Collins was crumbling, and I had accidentally lit the match. The next morning, I woke to the sound of chatter outside. A small crowd had gathered near the now-empty maintenance shed. The police had taken everything as evidence: the stolen tools, the falsified invoices, even the HOA's internal ledgers that had been misplaced for months. Neighbors pointed, speculated, and traded stories. One family said they'd been billed $600 last year for repairs to community sprinklers that never happened. Another mentioned the mysterious maintenance fund fee that had doubled under Collins' leadership. Everyone had suspected something, but no one had dared to question it, not until the police stepped in. Meanwhile, the HOA office, once the most intimidating building in the community, was eerily silent. Its blinds were shut, its notice board empty. No more red stamp warnings, no more violation slips taped to doors. The silence was liberating.
But it didn't last. By noon, Collins returned.
Not as the confident enforcer everyone feared, but as a desperate man clinging to a dying title. He drove slowly through the neighborhood, avoiding eye contact with anyone who looked his way. His once spotless SUV was now covered in dust, the HOA logo sticker removed from its window. Rumors spread quickly that he'd been released after questioning, pending further investigation. But he wasn't cleared, not even close. The police had already linked several of the recovered items to purchase orders approved under his signature. And worse, the HOA's treasurer, his close friend and often his right hand, had quietly resigned overnight and vanished. The community meeting that followed 2 days later was unlike anything Oakwood Estates had ever seen. Normally, HOA meetings were tense, rehearsed, filled with Collins' authority and the board's compliance. But now, the tables had turned. Over 50 residents crowded into the community hall, demanding answers. Without his clipboard, Collins looked small. The police report had become public record, and the evidence against him was overwhelming: unauthorized purchases, double billing, unfiled expenses, and personal transfers from HOA funds into private accounts. Every word of the report read like a confession written in numbers. Residents who had once feared speaking out now stood tall, one after another, sharing how they had been fined, manipulated, or silenced by Collins' board. A single mother had paid hundreds for a non-existent landscaping infraction. An elderly couple had been fined for improper lawn edging, the same week their check for HOA dues had been lost. The realization hit everyone hard. The HOA had been scamming them for years, right under their noses. As tempers flared, one of the city inspectors who had attended the raid stepped forward. He explained that the HOA was under full audit and that any homeowner who had been wrongly fined could file for restitution. The news sent a ripple of relief through the crowd, and panic through Collins. He tried to defend himself, insisting it was all a misunderstanding.
But no one believed him anymore.
The calm, controlled voice he once used to intimidate now cracked under pressure. His allies stayed silent. The clipboard king had fallen, and the kingdom wasn't his anymore. In the following weeks, the investigation deepened. The police traced stolen funds to multiple shell accounts tied to Collins and his treasurer. Fake contractors, fabricated receipts, even maintenance projects that existed only on paper, all of it came to light. The HOA's reputation was in ruins. The city suspended its operations, and a temporary management team was brought in to clean up the mess. They worked directly with residents to repair years of financial damage. Old fines were refunded, new rules were written, and for the first time, homeowners were invited to actually participate in decisions that affected them. For me, life slowly returned to normal. I went back to my morning workouts, free from harassment or stares. The sound of dumbbells and treadmill hums, once called a public nuisance, now blended peacefully with the sound of kids playing and dogs barking outside. But every time I passed the empty HOA office, I couldn't help but think about the strange chain of events.
It was surreal.
My simple decision to install a home gym, something completely innocent, had exposed years of corruption and greed. A few weeks later, I received a formal letter from the city. It thanked me for my cooperation during the investigation and confirmed that my recordings and statements had helped initiate a full audit. Attached was a small token of appreciation, a waiver for my HOA dues for the next year. But the real reward wasn't the money.
It was the peace.
For the first time since moving to Oakwood Estates, the air felt lighter. Neighbors smiled when passing by, lawns grew a little wilder without fear of fines, and the word violation finally disappeared from everyone's vocabulary. The fear that had once ruled the neighborhood was gone. Months later, the news finally broke: former HOA president arrested for embezzlement and fraud. The headline made its way through every local outlet. Photos showed Collins being led out of his office in handcuffs, the same man who once called the police on me. The irony was poetic. The enforcer had been exposed by the very system he tried to weaponize. In the aftermath, Oakwood Estates began to rebuild itself, slowly but beautifully. The new HOA, led by real homeowners who valued fairness, scrapped the unnecessary rules and focused on community improvement instead. They even turned the old maintenance shed, the one filled with stolen tools, into a small fitness corner for residents, complete with benches, mats, and free weights. It became a symbol of what had changed, proof that good things can grow from the ruins of greed. And as I stood there one evening, watching kids play near the same shed where everything began, I realized something important. Sometimes the smallest act, a quiet stand for what's right, can unravel years of corruption. In a world where power often hides behind rules and paperwork, truth has its own way of fighting back. Because when people in authority misuse power to control others, it only takes one moment, one honest mistake or one unsuspecting neighbor, to turn everything upside down. And in Oakwood Estates, that moment started with nothing more than the sound of a barbell hitting the floor.